Welcome back to another episode of the Government Transformation Show, the podcast for public sector changemakers. As ever, I'm your host, Sam Birchall, senior journalist here at Government Transformation Magazine, and I'm delighted to be joined in this conversation by Jess Booth from KPMG. So in this conversation, Jess talks about some of the biggest challenges and opportunities facing government as they seek to unlock new insights, new ways of delivering public services through data interoperability and integration. It's one of the biggest, most talked about topics for DDAT leaders right now. Lots to dig into, so let's dive straight in. Hello and welcome, Jess. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing on this Monday afternoon?
Hi, Sam. I'm doing really well today. Thanks very much. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And it's a pleasure to have you on to talk about the biggest challenges and opportunities facing government as they seek to unlock new insights and new ways of delivering public services through data interoperability and integration. It's a big topic. But first, we get started with some introductions. So Jess, over to you really. Like, what do you do at KPMG? How do you work with the public sector? Give us a bit of a play-by-play on kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah, definitely, Sam. So hello, everyone. I'm a data analytics director at KPMG, and I work across the public sector. So that includes clients in central government, local government, transport, education, and the NHS. I work with public sector clients and data teams on different challenges, ranging from data strategy, reporting and insights, advanced analytics, and that includes simulation analytics and also AI projects. And in my work, I'm really passionate about joining up different data sets and the topic of integration of data, because I see great benefits in being able to do that and produce better outcomes for citizens. And that could be, for example, joining up health and social care data with education, policing, with demographic data, transport, weather and housing. And all these things coming together really can create some really rich insights for the better for the citizen.
Yeah, I mean, the possibilities are endless. But when it comes to data interoperability, I mean, certainly from conversations I've had with government DDAT leaders, it's really one of the biggest areas of focus for performance capability. It's something that teams are really grappling with, how to interoperate between data sets, between departments, how do we break away from those also kind of talked about silos. And really keen to get into some of the specifics on that. But first, I guess, keen to hear what some of your kind of overarching reflections are. And I know you led a discussion table on data interoperability and integration at the recent summit. And during those touch points, but also, I guess, just during kind of wider conversations you're having with government departments, do you get a sense of current capability in government in terms of being able to interoperate between data sets, between departments? Just keen to get a sense of kind of what's changed, what hasn't.
Yeah, definitely. So there was certainly lots of engagement at the summit a few months ago. In particular, the table I was hosting on data interoperability and integration. So there's certainly capability in government around this topic, absolutely. And a lot of this, unfortunately, sits in silos within organisations. And organisations are working out how to link and share and govern their data and draw insights from the data that they have within their organisation. And a lot of them are doing that before they attempt the challenge of, linking with other government departments or other sets of data. There are challenges, obviously, where boundaries exist between organisations or between systems. So, for example, in the police force, they might be trying to solve complex crimes that relies on collaboration and data sharing between police forces. And that's not always that simple at the moment. Many organisations are starting to overcome some of the barriers, developing data strategies and the governance and insights through engaging with different stakeholders across the public sector, which rely on their data. So they're putting in place the roles such as data owners, data stewards, and improving the quality of their data, and hence improving insights or the data feeds that are within their control. There is certainly use of APIs and data standards at the moment where the data is being accessed by many departments on a frequent basis. So the NHS, for example, is very advanced in this respect. So it's got the NHS app, and it also has still many sets of data to work on. So social care and a lot of the primary care data still needs to be integrated. I also think from one of the topics that were brought up at the summit, AI is obviously on people's minds, and some of the new governance frameworks coming out from government, they're getting people to think about how their overall data and integration works, and then where AI can play a role in automating processes. But there's still quite a way to go for efficient mechanisms to move from legacy to modern data systems, and ensuring that the interoperability doesn't depend on APIs or AI that is referencing legacy systems. So these are some of the topics that we discussed for the last few months.
Yeah, really interesting. And I think you just get such a sense of the evolution that's taken place in the public sector with regards to how people are thinking and approaching data and strategizing it, whether it's kind of with governance rules or with certain appointments, and really thinking about it in a much more kind of complex way. But just to kind of expand on that a bit more, I'd be really keen to hear from you. What are some of the kind of biggest challenges facing government when it comes to making data more interoperable, both between kind of systems and also processes? And is there anything that kind of really stands out to you specifically in terms of where teams are grappling?
Yeah, definitely. So I'd like to touch on three key areas where I'm seeing the challenges. So that's lies in people, processes, and technology, the three areas. It's actually also where the solutions lie. But within people, so there is the cross public sector challenge of data skills and retaining talent in data. So public sector organizations need solution architects, they need data engineers and data scientists. And so these roles are in high demand at the moment and competing against private sector organizations. One other aspect around people is the incentivization needed for people to integrate and share data. And that's one of the key challenges in government. So when people are working for one organisation, but the benefits are seen in other organisations, there is that challenge of how do you incentivise people? From a processes point of view, so the governance is often not set up across or between the different organisations, allowing for the linking and sharing of data. And there could be different reasons for this. So sometimes it's contractual barriers, such as in the rail industry at the moment. In other cases, the governance isn't actually set up for new approaches to integrate data or for new use cases that exist in a digital environment. So the governance needs to catch up. And then thirdly, technology. So often we're seeing legacy tech is where a lot of the government data is still stored. So it really takes time to move the data to the cloud and more modern data platforms, which will enable operation between different data systems and more sharing. So those are some of the key challenges at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, as you pointed out, a lot to consider, a lot to think about. So what does success look like? And kind of can we touch maybe on some of those best practice areas that you've seen and kind of what's involved in that? If there's any particular case studies that you can draw on where it's kind of standout examples of data interoperability.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd like to call out a few examples from across the public sector, which I think really demonstrate where this is working well. So the first one is an excellent example of data interoperability in action. And this is in the transport sector. It's called the Bus Open Data Service, or BODS. So this is a collaboration led by DFT and where KPMG are supporting. It sees over 450 bus operators supplying high quality, standardized and accurate data for 8,500 local bus services around England. So it's a really large scale project. It required a modern and open source infrastructure technology platform. So this is where technology comes to the fore in this example. And that's being used to collect and openly share national bus data, including from local authorities who are a big part of this solution. So it might be, for example, disruptions, messaging, for the bus service that needs to come from local authorities. So the bus open data service, it integrates timetables, fares, real-time location information, so GPS data for around 32,000 buses. And it's enabling new passenger and operator apps, and it's improving the bus passenger experience across 4.5 billion annual journeys. So some of the key lessons from this one is really putting citizens forward and making sure we've got the users in mind, means that we're designing really citizen-focused apps and technology that they can use digitally. And it's also incentivizing everyone to share data through wanting to provide that end-to-end customer experience. So I really like this as an example, and also because I love buses.
We all do. It's what makes the country tick when they come on time anyway.
Absolutely, and that's helped by this new technology. So another example, which I think is a really good example of data integration, is in the healthcare domain. So it's a system called Patients Know Best. And this is about records that integrate into the NHS app and login, and it allows patients with a health record to directly access their combined data set from within the NHS app. So it includes health information from GPs, from hospitals, from community and mental services, and data collected from the patient. So it could be their wearable devices, their watches, Fitbits, etc. And this integration really enables patients to access their care plans, to exchange information with the health professionals, and then track and monitor their symptoms. So putting the control in the patient's fingertips, and being able to share that information when and as they choose. And it uses some of the technology I can mention. It's using FI here, so fast healthcare interoperability resources, which is APIs that use Care Connect across the NHS ecosystem. Because these are nationally defined interoperability standards, it means that the APIs can really easily integrate across any NHS trust and other healthcare organisations. So it's really powerful in that respect. Again, a national programme. It supports 20 languages, so it can be used by many different people who don't necessarily speak English as a first language. It's used at more than 60 hospitals around the world at the moment. And then it's really modernising the way that patients interact with the NHS, and it's reducing admissions to hospital, trips to the doctor, giving the patients the ability to self-serve and self-treat. So this is a great new system. Again, customers are at the heart of it. And some of the learning around this is that having a common system really creates efficiencies and creates one common standard for interoperability.
Great. I just, yeah, I love those examples. Just two really fantastic examples of where just, I guess, quite quick, easy points of data are shared, but are kind of able to really transform public services and really make a difference to, as you said, the user, putting the user at the heart of it. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing those examples and the lessons we can learn from them. Keen to dig a bit more into some of the kind of common challenges again that we face, and one of them which came up earlier was this kind of cultural point. A lot of the time it's not so much the technical challenge, but it's a cultural one, it's a behavioral one. From your perspective, what steps have you seen being taken that can improve interdepartmental collaboration and coordination to ensure that better, more efficient data integration?
Yeah, so I'd like to touch on some things that are already in progress and in place in government, because I think we're off to a running start right now. So it's a case of embedding this best practice and then adhering to some key principles and then driving consistency throughout government. So what is this best practice? Well, so we've got the Data Management Association, DARMA. They've established the data strategy framework, and then data integration and interoperability is a key component of this. So it means it links to all other elements of Dharma. There is a data sharing governance framework, and that's part of the government's national data strategy. It's backed up by something called the FAIR principles, FAIR, and that stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So these are really core principles for the technology, for the systems, and that all governance around data should adhere to. So a couple of other things. The Central Digital and Data Office has set up a data marketplace, and this is a great opportunity to share government data across departments and other organisations. So really creating that kind of commercial vehicle for sharing data and open data. The Integrated Data Service, that's another new initiative, and it's established by the ONS, the Office for National Statistics. This will really change the way data about our society and our economy are made available for researchers and decision making. So many things there already. I'd also like to touch on APIs, which I've mentioned already. So some of the best practices are through using APIs or application programming interfaces, which enables software programs to essentially talk to each other and share data in a common way. And I've already mentioned the healthcare domain uses FHIR, so FHIR, FHIR, Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. And that is a global standard for passing healthcare data between systems, and it's used throughout the UK. Meanwhile, we've got in rail, there's interoperability standards, and that was published by DFT 10 years ago. So that really supports the safe technical compatibility of trains and infrastructure. It's obviously extremely important that data is shared and it's done safely for benefit of freight and passenger customers. And similarly, we've got the open standards principle. So these are really important government standards, and the gov.uk website actually uses these principles, which is where a lot of interactions with citizens happens on the gov.uk website. So just a few examples of best practice already in action that we can be using.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned the kind of work being done by the CDDO and also ONS on the kind of data platform, kind of how it's helping departments and researchers kind of access that shared data much more easily will be really beneficial, and interested to see how that kind of evolves in the next year or so. Keen to switch it now over to looking at more the kind of tech side, I guess. So what kind of infrastructure upgrades or changes are necessary to effectively implement data interoperability in government?
Definitely. So that's really right. Infrastructure is a really important key to success with data sharing and interoperability. So often enterprises, organizations use a data lake or warehouse as the core, and then ETL processes, which is extract, transform, and load. They will help migrate data from legacy systems to the modern, more ideal infrastructure. And that allows interoperability between different data types. And to emphasize, that is probably more within an organization. But why would we stop at data lake and ETL? So we could move towards a more decentralized and federated approach with a semantic layer, as it's called, that sits above this and ensures the FAIR principles of being findable and then more consistent use of terminology to access the data. And the benefit of that more federated approach is it encourages a wider network of organisations. So it could be government departments and other organisations to share data securely. And it really puts the control in the organisation, individual organisations that own their data, lets them decide who and in what circumstances to share that data. And so data mesh is a kind of latest way of doing this. And that makes data more accessible and available by directly connecting data owners, the producers, and the consumers of data. So there's a lot going on in the technology sphere around data interoperability.
Absolutely. I'm curious to get your thoughts on how do we balance kind of specific data user needs in a department, I guess, with a kind of desire for data interoperability across government.
Mm. Yeah, so it's a really good question. I don't think organizations can expect to change and uplift what they're currently doing without supporting the staff themselves who are there collating and using and monitoring and managing data. So I think it's really important that there's training in place for staff and continuous improvement approaches, and that might include agile methods of working. I believe we, as I've mentioned already, we really need to incentivize the integration of data so that it's not the end user just benefiting from the service. It's people thinking about who else needs that data and then the reason why they're investing in integration efforts, which is one of the main reasons cross-government projects often fail at the moment. So really essential to make sure everyone realizes making the effort to integrate data eventually benefits themselves and the wider citizens and wider organizations. So we're all part of like a big ecosystem sharing and using data.
Mm.
And I also think that communication is critical. So communicating clearly and regularly to staff about the importance of data best practices, some that I've already mentioned. It creates a kind of rhythm, shows people why it matters. It also builds engagement amongst your teams.
Mm.
And one way of doing this could be setting up user forums that we're seeing a lot around government at the moment. So communities of practice where people share their thoughts, their tips and guidance, and the latest sort of government guidance. And then the topic will become much more real for everyone. So as I say, we're seeing this happen a lot more across government at the moment.
Just a lot more collaboration, which is just a word I've been hearing a lot about this year. I feel like it's going to be the year of collaboration, engagement around this, definitely. And I mean, it's the word on everyone's lips at the moment, but I have to ask you, so AI, how can AI play into data interoperability?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about AI and doing projects related to AI. And you can't just consider AI in isolation. So it plays a big role in data interoperability. And there's several ways it's doing that. So automation and AI are, for example, making the ETL processes faster and easier and more accurate. So first of all, AI can support the extraction phase. So it can automate the identification and retrieval of data from different sources and do that faster. And algorithms can also apply patterns or rules, and they transform data into consistent usable formats. And that can also improve the quality of the data through the transform process. And thirdly, they can support the load process, so of the ETL, by automatically mapping the transformed data into a target systems format. And this has been done, there are many examples of this. One example is a international one which had lots of regional courts and they were using a secure cloud system, but they needed to integrate legacy data into that cloud system. And so they applied AI to do some of this ETL, and it made it a much simpler, slicker process. And this can also be done throughout the public sector. So I would advise on that. I'd also like to take a moment to mention the new generative AI framework for HMG. So this really sets out how generative AI can be used safely and securely in government. It will mean that people in government have this guidebook for how to progress opportunities to do with Gen AI, and that also means how to integrate data. One of the use cases suggested in the latest government framework is to speed up delivery of services. So it says retrieving relevant organisational information faster to answer citizen digital queries or routing email correspondence to the right parts of business. So you can see how generative AI can play that role in integration and sharing of data.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that guideline in particular is sort of a a work in progress, which they say themselves? Is it something that is going to be continually adapted to and added to as more understanding around generative AI is kind of brought to the fore? So lots of exciting things to come, I think. But Jess, final question for you. How can we build on those early wins around this? So how can we continue to take best practices around data interoperability that step further? What's next?
Mm. So we've got the building blocks as I've laid out. So we've got some success stories emerging. So what do organizations need to do next? So there's a few things I'd like to end on. So one is a commitment to making data interoperable and integrating data. And that is to do with understanding the benefits that are going to be gained through different use cases. Secondly, a clear data governance operating model for the organization that you're in. So that's about agreeing owners' roles and responsibilities within your organization. And then getting buy-in and funding from leadership is super important. Not necessarily an easy thing, but it's that understanding of the change and the accountability for the data processes that you want to get that support from leadership on. Also data quality, so really important that that's monitored and managed, and then using automated tools for data entry. We've talked about how AI can play a role there. So there's quite a long way to go still, but I'm really encouraged by what's going on already, what I've seen in government. It was great to see so many enthusiastic people at the summit talking about this topic, and seeing all these governance frameworks in place, in particular the generative AI one more recently. So I think that if organizations across the public sector can embed some of this best practice internally and then collaborate with others in government, we could really see strides made really quickly over the coming years, and then ultimately benefiting citizens, which is really where I want to end this talk today.
What we're all here for. Well, Jess, thank you so much. I think you've laid out some great building blocks. You gave some really fantastic examples in the transport and health sector and where it's worked. And then you've also laid out kind of where we can go from here. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for your time and for coming on the podcast, and definitely come back.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.